Hello, everyone, and welcome to chapter 200 of The Last Thoughts of a Busy Mind. This one titled Iran Has a Complex History. Before we go on, I probably sound a little bit different than usual. It's because for the first time in the history of this podcast, I am not recording this with my usual recorder. Recording this using an OSA lav mic connected to a popsicle stick that I'm holding in front of my mouth. So, innovation and all of that. But yeah, it is. I don't have my voice recorder with me this week, so you're gonna have to endure me sounding a little bit different. Anyways, my drink for this episode is water, just normal water from the tap, which probably is going to kill me. But that's another thing. So let's talk about Iran and its history. Now, this subject, as you may have also noticed, there wasn't a voice at the beginning of this episode. It's because, again, I kind of fucked up the scheduling, and I'm sorry about that. But yeah, for this one, I also had something in mind, and that is Iranian history, because it is actually a subject that a lot of Iranians themselves fool themselves about. Okay, we need to. Well, there is no better way to say it. Let's go and talk about it. Okay, first of all, if overview of what Iran is, if you are unaware of it. Um, when I'm talking about the Iranian history, I'm not talking about a continuous thing. I'm basically talking about the history of the region that Iran currently exists in. Because for a huge chunk of history, and when I mean huge, I mean at least 400, 500 years, there hasn't been a central government in this part, there have been other dynasties ruling in different parts of it. For example, when Khwarezm-Shahian were kind of fighting against the Mongols, at the same time there were a ruling dynasty in the west of Iran that was completely different. And when we were studying history in school, we learned about all of them indiscriminately. Like they're part of a grand, very realized, and very continuous narrative. And that is something of a bygone artifact that is given to us by the last monarchist state of Iran, which always wanted to have a direct lineage between the Pahlavi dynasty, Muhammad Reza Shah and Reza Shah, and the Achaemenians, or we call them Hachamanishian, and I never get used to the English pronunciation of it. Basically, Cyrus the Great, Darius the One, Darius the Great, and things like that. Basically, they wanted a direct lineage, so they kind of had to look at everything, all of these segmentations and fragmentations in history, as all part of the same thing. And that is just patently untrue. Um, so yeah, but let's start from Cyrus the Great and everyone like that. There was apparently a grand Persian empire back in the day. Uh, I'm sounding a little bit sarcastic there. It's mostly because monarchists have made talking about Iranian history very, very, very annoying. But yeah, back in the day, there was a Persian empire made by the Cyrus the Great. The guy, the one that was in Rustage's Leaders of the History rap ciphers. Sorry, but and that empire was kind of destroyed when Alexander the Great attacked Iran, and we were invaded and conquered. And that actually brings me to another thing, which is the tenacity of Iranian culture. And it's something that I think I touched on in the previous episodes, but I think is bear repeating now. Iran has had three major culture changing and uprooting invasions, things that, technically speaking, destroyed everything else that they touched. One of them was the invasion of Alexander the Great. The other one is the Arabic invasion, which is the invasion of the Caliph Omar to all of the neighboring states of what is currently Saudi Arabia, but back in the day was Arabian Peninsula, and then the Mongol invasion. All three of which kind of reshaped everything that they touched, and Iranian culture, despite all of that, managed to adapt. We took names from their cultures, we took traditions from their cultures, and we kept some things from ourselves. And that is one of the reasons why there seems to be an unbroken line. Because, well, for example, when Egypt was the subject of Arabic invasion, they just completely changed. There is nothing of the original language there. There is nothing of a lot of the original customs there. They are, in the rudest and crudest of ways, another Arabic country, which is why Jamal Abdel Nasser was very keen in the Pan Arabism idea and saw Egypt as an Arabic country first. But Iranians, we have a complex emotional history because, well, we didn't give in that easily. So the assumption that there must be an unbroken line between Cyrus the Great and Reza Shah Pahlavi is very believable, even though it's not true. When Arabic invasion happened, Iran didn't have a central government. We were one of the many areas under the rule of the Caliph, which is the leader of the Arabic Empire. And that Arabic Empire didn't fully go away until Genghis Khan. That's important to remember. Until Genghis Khan attacked Middle East and conquered it, the Arabic Empire, the Arabic Caliphdom, was still going on. And it's important to remember that because here's somewhat something important. The Pahlavi dynasty, the last dynasty to ever rule over Iran at this point, and hopefully forever, uh, wasn't a direct descendant of Cyrus the Great and Achaemenians, because there isn't a direct line. The line that they can directly go back to is the Safavid Empire, which is, again, an impressive feat. Safavid Empire's main enemy was the Ottoman Empire. I talked about this last week when I was talking about religiosity, because they are part of the reason why Iran has a Shia identity. And not part of, they are the reason Iran has a Shia identity, which was the identity they chose to differentiate themselves from the Sunni Ottoman Empire. So Safavids were the beginning of a basically new order in Iran. They established what we currently assume to be Iran. And you can draw a line from Safavid, from Sheikh Safiuddin Ardebili, all the way to, well, Islamic Republic, because that's the way they went. You know, there was a Safavid Empire, then Nader Shah Afshar, then Karim Khanazan, then the Qajar dynasty, which ruled for an impressive, like, around 200 years. That is not nothing. That is a long time for a dynasty, especially in Iran, to rule. And then there was the Pahlavi dynasty and then the Islamic Republic. So it's important for us to remember that the lineage of the monarchist in Iran go back to Safavid Empire, not to Achaemenian Empire, because when you conflate the two, you began realizing some very, very odd nationalistic ideas in Iran. Some that can give rise to a lot of, well, also nationalist mindsets, and end up basically damaging the, well, I'm trying to be nice, you know, I know talking about history is very easy for me to dunk on monarchists. They famously do not read history. They are famously in the revision and they are famously revisionists of history. And the Big Daddy, Muhammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, really, really liked to be connected to Cyrus the Great, to a past ideal, which is why they have a lot of fascistic ideologies, because, well, much like Mussolini did with the Roman Empire and Hitler did with Otto von Bismarck and the German Empire, um, Muhammad Reza Shah really liked to be part of a grand empire and created an ultra nationalistic view. And that ultra nationalistic view is, it requires you to not understand a lot of things. It requires you to not understand that the Arabic invasion happened partly because people welcomed it. People wanted it because the monarchy system at the time wasn't working. It had created a class divide, especially with people living in the capital and with closer connections to the king than everyone else. And the idea of equality was kind of good for these people, so they actually welcomed the Arabic invasion, because Arabic invasion was under the guise of equality. And these are why these people have a hard time believing that so many people in 1979 just didn't want the fucking king. Which is, again, I know the actual history is a little bit more complex, and hopefully one day we will get into that. I'm just talking about general history right now, but yeah, it is more complicated than I'm telling you, and you can read up on it and basically listen to what people who lived to that time say, but what they said back then, not what they're saying now, because remorse and shame are two very powerful tools and especially good for reviewing history and revisionism. So yeah, but a lot of people just didn't want the monarchy because the monarchy was not working for them. They didn't see it. People were like, "Oh, but the prosperity of Iran." But like, does it matter if Iran is getting prosperous if nobody is seeing that prosperity except a few people in Tehran? And the same thing happened when the Sassanid Empire was becoming bloated and corrupt and basically self centered. So people wanted the invasion. So historical revisionism wants you to kind of forget that. You know, the Arabic invasion was an unjust invasion that changed and ruined Iran, even though the people wanted it, even though our culture survived, even though our culture integrated with the Arabic language and the Arabic ideals to the point that our um, lettering is the Kufi lettering. We cannot, there are people who are like, oh, let's not use Arabic words, and they are so dumb. It's like the English saying, okay, from now on, we're not going to use French words. And it's dumb. It's part of the culture. It's part of how you talk, motherfucker. How are you going to just remove those words? And okay, that's part of the reason why talking about history is kind of frustrating, because once you kind of realize that the line isn't unbroken, that the line is broken for a huge chunk of it, we were under an Arabic Empire rule, and then smaller dynasties began to came. Samanid dynasties, the Ghaznavis, as I said. Oh no, I didn't say the Khwarezm-Shahiyan. The Ghaznavis was also um, the Seljuks. Yes, we were part of that dynasty. Uh, Alebuye, and then Safavids. It's kind of, when you realize that, it gives you a perspective. It gives you a perspective that the ultra nationalistic view that says we are all children of Cyrus is a little bit dumb and a little bit regressive, because then you are starting to draw a line. Who is? Technically speaking, the Achaemenid Empire ran through Palestine, to Egypt, to what was Babylon back in the day, to Arabian Peninsula. This way it went to Afghanistan and of course Pakistan and Turkmenistan. It was huge. It was big. So are you considering Turkey as part of Sons of Cyrus or not? That is the main argument that I want to get away from. The way Iranians and people outside of Iran who don't understand Iranian history want to use it. There are people who are like, oh, you were once a great empire, and one day you will become a great empire. Most of them are right wingers because, it's easy to harken back to a glorious empire and want to rile people up to one day we can become like that. But no, we are not the direct descendants of Cyrus the Great. More than likely, we are the direct descendants of Genghis Khan. That is just a historical and genetic fact. He fucked a lot of girls and spread his seed as wide as he could. I am not even joking here. There is a 1 in 7 chance that I am the direct descendant of Genghis Khan. And you know what? Fuck it. So I am. So I'm not directly descended from Cyrus the Great. Does that denigrate my culture? Does that denigrate my history? Does that mean that I cannot look at Cyrus the Great as a source of inspiration? No. The same way I can do that. People in Turkey can do that. People in Egypt can do that. People in Syria, Palestine, people in Saudi Arabia can look at Cyrus the Great as part of their shared history because he was the king of the Achaemenid Empire, and the Achaemenid Empire was fucking huge. But the reason Iranians want to do that is because they want to exclude. They don't think of, especially monarchists. Sorry, I'm going back to them. I know I said I don't want to dunk on them too much, but it's hard. They make this shit so frustrating. But they don't want the inclusion of everyone who was once part of the Achaemenid Empire. They're likely gonna be hung up on the word Iranian and Persian. They don't call it the Achaemenid Empire, they call it the Persian Empire. Which is again bringing us back to the idea of the racial, and which I've talked about extensively in the first 2 episodes of this season, and you can go back and listen to them. And I do suggest you do, if you're not, listen to these episodes like a concept album. They all flow into each other in a way. But yeah, the same is true for people who want to just uh, disregard the history, which is the other side of the coin, where they're like, no, the history of Iran is directly connected to the history of Islam and nothing before it mattered. No, all of them mattered, because a lot of what we currently consider part of our cultural icons, the fact that our holidays isn't the same as half of the world's holiday, and we take our holidays in spring, is an ancient thing. It's an ancient custom dating back to the Achaemenid Empire. Nowruz is a very old concept, so you cannot disregard the history, yet you cannot think about it as this exclusively Iranian thing. It's not exclusively ours, because we weren't the only subjects of the Achaemenid Empire. We weren't the only subjects of the Sassanid Empire even. These are huge empires. And the line between them to the last monarchy in Iran is a broken line. And it's important that Iranians realize that. And it's important that people who use these things to try to rile up Iranians and basically try to implement their fascistic ideas into Iranian discourse to realize that. The history you want to go back to doesn't exist. Deal with it. Try to make now better. Try to make future better. Try to make it more inclusive. Do you really want